Okay, so just as a quick reminder, last time we did chapter 15. In general, we've been discussing our hero, the possible man or the possible woman, otherwise known as the Benoni. And after we described the technicalities of who this person is, we started touching upon different elements of the Benoni's life. So for example, in chapter 15, last time we learned together, we spoke about what if somebody is by nature just very mellow and very, not passionate, maybe a bookworm, maybe a nerd, whatever you want to, however you want to term this person, but somebody who doesn't have strong, passionate desires to do things and to indulge in things in life. And so this person does the right thing, not because they're working hard at it, but just because it's easy for them to do the right thing. And in the analysis in chapter 15, the Tanya said this person would not be described as an Oved, as a servant of God, as someone who's serving God, because they're not actively serving God. Person needs to be actively investing in their service of God. So if it comes easy to you, we'll find something that's not easy. Create tension if there's no tension. If you're just doing the right thing because that's your nature, because that's how you were born, because that's how you were raised, because that's just the type of person you are, then you're not doing it right. You need to find the area in which you need to put in effort, and that's when you become a real servant of God, when you're actively putting in effort into what you're doing. Today, in chapter 16, we lead from that idea into a related but different idea, which is the idea of passion, infusing passion into our Judaism. So I want to ask you first a question to think about. Think about different types of things that you do. And I want you to think about the difference between things that you do because you have to or things that you do because you really want to. What's the difference in how you do those different things? Anyone want to share?
Well, I would imagine that the things you want to do, I'd say you are passionate about. You can talk about it all day long, do it all day long, and say, if they didn't pay me for this, I would do it for free, kind of thing, versus being obligated or having to do something for whatever circumstance. Your mindset is very different.
That's right. Your mindset's very different. What about the action itself? How does the action happen? Do you do it in the same way? I mean, I know for myself, when I'm very passionate about something, it's like, well, I invest myself more into it. I'm like excited to do it. Maybe I try to do it in the best possible way. I try to, add all the little touches and all the different things to make it really, really special. Whereas if it's something that I just need to do, it's like, begrudging, like dragging my feet doing it and like just hoping it passes really fast and I never have to deal with this thing again for a very long time, right?
But if you're a responsible person, I mean, that's also a personality thing. The passion side, you'll do it, you'll love it, you're very responsible. But if that's who you are, even if you don't want to do the other thing, I would hope that you apply the same principles, dignity, integrity. You might do it begrudgingly, but you
Right.
can't change your core of who you are.
So 100%, you're still, like you said, you're a responsible person. You're still going to get it done. The taxes will get filed, the garbage will be taken out, whatever it is, those tasks that you don't love to do, but you'll do them. But, if, you're an artist, right? So do you file your taxes with as much passion as you draw a piece of art?
Well,
Um, so
I guess it depends if you're getting a big you're getting money back on your taxes.
That's true.
And it's a little bit more fun to do.
I mean, I think if you do something passion, it's out of emotion. If you do something, I'll say mundane, have to, responsible, It's more of an intellect of like, I need to do this to be a responsible person. So I'm going to do it whether I want to do it or not. So it's more of a just,
An
as they say, just
intellectual
do
thing.
it. Yeah.
Just do it, right. So which one has more of you in it?
More what?
More of you. Which one are you doing with your whole self?
The emotion one, because
Yeah,
you're
the
using your
emotion one.
heart and not just your intellect of I have to do this, I have to file my taxes so I don't end up
Yeah.
in jail, is different than like being Carolyn. I'm creating this masterpiece for our living room. That's like from here. It's not from here.
And you also, I feel like you see the signature of the person on it, right? Art that was created out of, a lot of passion. There was, you look at that piece of art, you see the person, you see the artist who created it. Whereas the person, and someone who built something or someone who decorated something, whatever it is, someone who cooked something, right? If they were really invested in it, like if I had to describe how much of me is invested in my, decorating a cake that I'm really enjoying to decorate versus whipping together mac and cheese because that's all my kids want to eat and it's like the quickest dinner I can make, which one has more of me in it? Obviously the first one. It's something that I was invested in. Now, even within emotion that we put into things, there's also a range. If you think about it, there's things that you are very passionate about and like really excited to do. There are things that you are maybe more mildly passionate about. And then there are things that you care about, but maybe not with as much intensity. So, for example, I'll give you an example in my own life, right? And it could look different for different people. But for me, when it comes to, say, something that I care about, I don't do it because I have to. I do it because I want to, because I know it's the right thing, but I can't say I'm like so passionate about it. Recycling. I don't recycle because I'm being forced to recycle. I'm recycling because I feel that it's the right thing. I know that it's the right thing. I want to, I, I care about it enough that I'm doing it. Even if no one's looking, I'm going to make sure to recycle. At the same time, I'm not like passionate, need to go, I don't know. That's not my passion. When it comes to education, I'm definitely more passionate about that. Like I get excited when I talk about education, when I, am involved in something to do specifically with like elementary education. I'm excited about it. It like excites me. I'll do it with even more passion. And then if I want to take it to a higher level, well, something that involves my own kids, I could say I'm super passionate about, right? Like I'll be like totally in on it, every detail, stay up all night, whatever it takes. So all of these things are things that I care about, but even within caring about things, there's different levels of passion that we have for different things, and that's going to look different for different people. Of course, then there's the things that we do and we have zero passion for. But there's a full range of I don't care about it at all, but I'm doing it because I need to do it. I'm doing it because I care about it and I know it's the right thing, or I'm really excited to do it, or I'm super excited to do it. And obviously, there's a full range there. Why are we talking about this? We're talking about this because if we look back, one of the main tools that we've gotten from Tanya so far, where the Tanya is encouraging us to live a life the way God wants us to live our lives, the main tool that we've gotten so far from the Tanya is what the Tanya calls moach shalit al halev. The mind rules over the heart. Basically, mind control. You might feel like doing certain things, you might want to do certain things, but you have the ability to control your heart and do what you know is the right thing. And we gave many examples for this. How even if we really don't feel like it and don't want to, we could make ourselves do the right thing. That was one of the first earliest tools that Tanya gave us. And the Tanya says this is what the Benoni does. And the Benoni is not someone who only wants to do the right thing. The Benoni is not necessarily an inspired person. They're not always in the mood of doing the right thing. And the Benoni has a lot of desires and passions that are not aligned with godliness. But the Benoni will always stop and do the thing that God wants them to do. And so we said the first tool, and since Tanya is telling us that the Benoni is the level we're striving for, and it's something that's attainable for every person, the Tanya said the first thing you need to know is you need to know that your mind has the ability to control your heart. You don't have to give in to your desires. But that being said, let's say we meet someone who's doing this very well, you know, Mr. Benoni or Mrs. Benoni, right? They're always doing the right thing because they know it's the right thing and they're succeeding at it. If I stop them in the street and I say, so, how do you feel about your Judaism? What are they going to say? I don't know if it'll be a very positive answer. Meaning they might be doing all the right things, but are they feeling excited about it? Are they passionate? Are they positive about it? Maybe, maybe not, you know? Sometimes we meet people like that and they're like the bad advertisement for being religious. You know, you meet people that are so obsessed with being religious, as we call it, or doing the right thing, that they're pretty tense people. And there's so much anxiety there. And it does not look for a second like they're serving God out of joy or out of love. They're just serving God because this is what they need to do. And maybe they're also trying to make you do what, you know, they think is the right thing to do. And sometimes you look at a person like that and say, you know, like, you might just drop the whole religion thing. Just become a nice person first. You know, like, why are you like so tense about everything? So serving God, doing the right thing without feeling it might be the first step that we need to take, because Judaism doesn't wait for us to feel it before we do it. We're told you have to do the right thing even when you don't feel it. But simultaneously, this is what chapter 16 introduces. You can't stop there. You can't just serve God because it's the right thing. You need to also work on developing emotion. And chapter 16 tells us it is super important. Complete service of God is something that involves, yes, the right actions, but also emotions. I need to have positive emotions invested in my service of God. Now, I can think of different reasons why this is required. For starters, remember, like we said, the thing that we put ourselves fully into and the things that we don't put ourselves fully into. God wants all of us. He wants full me to be serving him, not just my hands when I'm, you know, doing the right thing, not just my mind when I'm, you know, stopping my heart from feeling and making myself do the right thing, but my heart and my passion and my emotion, all of me should be invested in serving God. That's the main reason. On a very practical level, I think most of us can relate to the idea that probably serving God without emotion is pretty hard to sustain, right? What happens if I am, you know, I could compare it, let's say, to a diet. If someone being on a very strict diet and they really, really don't like it, like they're being restricted from eating all of their favorite foods. If they have amazing, amazing self-control, yeah, they might be successful on the diet. They may actually, you know, when they send in the report to the doctor or the nutritionist at the end of the week, they get all the checks, like they're doing it all right. But you meet that person and they're just so frustrated and they're just sometimes always just in a bad mood and just snarky because there's a part of them that's being so suppressed. If somebody is only serving God out of requirement and without any passion, you're really risking being able to maintain it. You know, what's going to happen at some point? Either they'll just be a really nasty person or a really emotionless person, someone whose emotions are so squashed, or they might just snap, like, you know, and just lose it all like in 1 second. And we all meet people who take on these like huge, huge, huge resolutions and they force themselves to do it. And then at some point they just stop the whole thing. You're like, whoa, wait, you got so far. Why'd you drop the whole thing? Because it didn't feel right, right? And it was just too much for them to do. And sometimes maybe they don't just drop the whole thing, but maybe there's like a slow regression because you can't maintain the momentum if you don't have emotion. But regardless, Tanya tells us you need to have emotion and passion in your Judaism. So how do we do that? How do we bring emotion into our Judaism? So this is where we kind of go back full circle, where in the very beginning of Tanya, we were talking about the structure of the sphirot and the structure of the soul. And what did we say is the relationship between the intellect and the emotion? Anyone remember? You're muted. I can't hear you.
The intellect is higher than the emotion.
Higher, right? And the
Because
intellect
the
are
crown is the top.
true. And also the intellect is the parent of the emotions. We said there's chachma, bina, da'at, and then there's emotion. There's wisdom, understanding, knowledge, and that gives birth to emotion. Wisdom is, the iconic male energy. Understanding, bina, is that female energy. Da'at is when, and I know we've discussed this in the past, but you can know something intellectually, academically, and it doesn't actually affect you. But the concept of da'at is when you focus on that knowledge that you have. When you really focus on that knowledge and you really commit it to your mind and you think about it actively, it's going to start arousing emotions for you. So I'll give you an example of something most of us do on a regular basis. When you come across a situation and you're like, oh, why? What if that happens, right? I don't know. You read the news and now you're nervous that something might happen, or your friend is going somewhere, or your child is traveling somewhere that's maybe not so safe, and you start thinking like, what if? We let our minds drift to the what if. We think enough what if, and what happens? We start feeling very anxious, right? And suddenly we have this like anxiety over just something that we're thinking about. Because when you think about something, it's something that Tanya teaches us. When you think about something, you have the ability to create emotion. And your emotions will come from whatever you think about. So if you're constantly thinking about your traumas, you're going to feel very anxious. If you're constantly thinking about, that awful person at work who really bothered you, you're going to feel very upset, and it becomes visceral. Like, I could think of things that I replay in my mind and I start feeling it, right? I start feeling it, in however it is that you experience emotion. I start feeling it in my heart. I start feeling it in my chest. I start feeling it in my neck. We all have experiences where we create emotion. But Tanya tells us, use the same concept, but use it proactively to create emotion for God. If you take time to think about God enough, you can actually create emotions and feelings for him. So this is really the very basis of Jewish meditation, according to the Tanya. I know most of us, when we hear meditation, we think of like, Eastern religious meditations. Most meditations that people are exposed to are, and I don't have experience with this, but maybe someone here does, is meditation that requires you to like clear your mind of everything, to kind of like have this like blank mind for meditation. The meditation that the Tanya talks about probably translates better as contemplation, not blank mind. Take a concept that you know and don't clear your mind of it, but focus on it. Just take the time to focus on this particular concept that you have. You think about it and focus on it enough, you will create emotion. And this is one of the keys to living life according to the Tanya. It's taking time every day, whether it's in my prayers, before my prayers, maybe it's at night before I go to sleep, maybe it's a few times a day, but really taking the time to stop and just think about godliness. Now, what am I going to think about? For that, you have to study, right? Because I can't think about a God that I don't know much about. So Tanya gives us some great things to think about, because many Jewish texts don't talk about God, right? Talks about how to keep this holiday, how to keep that holiday, how to do kosher, what Jews believe, what will happen, when Mashiach comes, Jewish history, what happened to, but actually thinking about God and godliness, there aren't that many texts that talk about that, but the Tanya does and Kabbalah does. And the Tanya tells us, if I take the time to think of how great God is, think about what it is that will arouse emotion for you. It could be different for different people, right? But I think about how great God is and how in his infinite greatness, he is so much, he is so infinite compared to the world, and yet he takes the time to care about me, about little me. He like manages all my steps. and he plans things that will happen for me or won't happen for me. And he's so invested and involved in every detail of my life. Again, I could say it, but I could really think about it, like close my eyes and really think about that. And it may just awaken a feeling of, wow, I I really like this God. Like I feel something for him. Maybe I spend time in nature and I look at, beautiful elements of nature and I say, God created all of this. Like this is just like a reflection of his majesty. And again, when I really put my mind to it, I can start arousing emotion for it. And I could start emotion for him and I could start really feeling for God. Now go and do a mitzvah. That same mitzvah that I did yesterday just because I know it's the right thing to do, versus today when I really contemplated this and I say, then this great God, he wants me to, be kind to my neighbor, even though that my neighbor is really annoying, or he wants me to give charity 10% of my earnings, even though sometimes it feels like, it hurts to give that much. Or he wants me to celebrate Shabbat in a specific way. Again, when I sit and I arouse emotion, when I think about God, I could arouse emotion for God, and then that emotion infuses my actions. Another example, I think is a very tangible example, is a parent with a child. Or think of any person that you love, someone in your life who's close to you, whom you love deeply, but sometimes frustrates you. Maybe it's a child, maybe it's a spouse, maybe it's a friend, maybe it's a sibling. They just have their things that they do that makes you like want to pull your hair out. But deep, deep down, you know you love them. You really care about them. What are you going to tell yourself? I mean, you can choose to just, not have a relationship with this person. But if you care about this person, especially if let's say you're about to spend the weekend with this person and you want it to go well, you want it to be smooth. So a lot of times we take the time to think about what it is that I love about this person. Why do I love them? Maybe it's their character traits. Maybe it's because it's my child and I know I would do anything for them because I really care for them, even beyond the daily annoyances. Or maybe it's my sibling that irritates me, but deep down I feel for them because it's my brother, it's my sister, whatever it is. I know that if I take the time to think about this person's positive traits, and maybe their smile, and maybe their kindness, and those things that I appreciate about them, I'm going to feel differently towards them. Even if I may have to remind myself a few times over the weekend, wait, remember, you really love your brother, sister, child, whatever it is. But I do know that every time I stop and I think about those qualities, it can allow me to feel positive feelings for them. So the Tanya says, do the same for God. When you do this for God, you can infuse those actions that you're already taking, because we're already trying to apply the mind controls the heart. Now take it a step further and try to create emotion so that you're doing it because you have to, but you also have passion and feeling for it. Thoughts or questions? Yeah, go ahead, Sarah.
So that's based on a premise that there is no emotion. Is there a flip side where somebody is essentially overly emotional about, every mitzvah is so important? Not so much that the example you gave of the poster child for the bad representatives of people who are observant and, knocking into people on the way to, I got to run to do a mitzvah and they're knocking you over, whatever. But the person who is so invested emotionally to have a relationship with God to the point where it's very emotional, it's very intense. It's almost the reverse. And I'm trying to understand, I guess I'll call it the boundaries of the emotions.
So in what way is it problematic, their intense emotion? Is it stopping them from doing the right thing? Is it getting in someone's way? Like what's the problem with their intense emotion?
I mean, it feels like it's very intense. And I don't think, like, for example, it feels like almost perhaps the intention is, okay, well, I don't want to get punished, or I want to serve God, and maybe I'm not good enough in doing it. It's a flawed argument, I hear, but you can't. It's very hard to change emotions when they come from this place of, I'll call it awe instead of fear, right? Awe is what it should be, but it could also be more fearful.
So the Tanya tells us that we need to create a balance of emotions. The first comes the ahava, the love, and then comes the awe that balances it out, meaning that the emotion of love is an emotion that draws us close. It's the emotion that compels us to do something for another person, or in God's case, for God, do the positive mitzvah. The emotion of awe is the emotion that stops us from doing the wrong thing, right? When I am about to do something that I know is going to really, really upset someone I love, if I think about that, I don't really want to hurt them. I really
Okay,
don't
so
want to hurt our
feedback.
relationship, right? But I need to have both. I need to have a balance of both. I can't lead my life just from the place of awe or just from the place of love. Just from the place of love, there's no boundaries. I'm like spilling myself all over the place. And if I'm just leading from the place of awe, then I'm all walls and boundaries and intensity, right? We need to have a balance. They're on the scale of the sphirot, the love and the awe are exactly opposite each other. It
And maybe
sits
I'm
down.
taking it
Yeah,
I'm probably taking it too literally with the example of a person, because if I have a person in front of me, I'm going to see their feedback, and that feedback is going to lead me to an understanding if I did right or wrong. Okay, if I give somebody a present and they're looking at me like very angry, obviously I got them something that was offensive, as opposed to if I gave them a present and they're smiling ear to ear. Okay, I did good by them. I did something appropriate, but I get that feedback instantaneously. We have a different, I have a different relationship with God. I don't get instant feedback. Do you see what I'm saying?
yeah, but this is not talking about the feedback. This is talking about how you're doing the action to begin with. So say you're having, a guest in your house. In this case, the guest is God. So how are you preparing for this guest? Are you like, oh man, I have to set the table. This guest, demands four-course dinners and, like all annoyed about it, but doing it begrudgingly because I know I need to do this, or maybe I'm afraid of their reaction if I don't do this? Or are you excited about it and feeling positive and passionate? How can you feel positive about it when you think about, wait a second, why am I inviting this guest to begin with? Why do I care about this guest? Why do I want this guest to be comfortable in my house? What does this guest do for me? So if I'm going to switch out the word guest for God, when I engage in doing the mitzvahs and I arouse emotion for God, then the way in which I go about doing the mitzvahs is not dry. It's passionate. It's excited.
Mhm.
Now, maybe somebody arouses so much emotion that they're like dancing their way to, set the Shabbat table. I would say good for them. The Tanya actually, the most of this chapter actually talks about the opposite problem. Tanya goes straight into the next natural question, which many people ask, which is, well, I try that. I really try to think about God, and I can get myself, kind of like excited about it, but it doesn't make me start singing and dancing while I'm doing the mitzvahs. I'm not feeling that intense passion. Some people do, some people don't. For most people, there's a variety. Like maybe there's some mitzvahs I could really make myself so passionate about because of my personality or because it talks to me or because, whatever. And some mitzvahs that are still going to be hard for me to do. Like I'm really trying to focus my thoughts and create emotion. But the most I can get to is like, the way I feel that the Tanya calls it tavuna, like an intellectual emotion, kind of like an appreciation. I can get an appreciation for it. I can't create insane passion. Maybe like how I feel about recycling, like I know it's the right thing. I appreciate why I'm doing this. I know I'm doing this to, but I'm just not going to dance my way to the recycling. It just not working for me. And that's what the second part of chapter 16 addresses, which is what happens if I can create that level of emotion. And that's when the Tanya says something very interesting, that what's the goal we're trying to get to? The goal we're trying to get to is that the mitzvahs that I do are richer. Because when I do a mitzvah with emotion, it's alive. I'm still ticking the boxes if I do it without emotion, but it's not the same. And an example that's given later on in the Tanya is like a bird, right? A bird that doesn't have wings is alive. It's there, but it can't fly. When I do a mitzvah without passion, it's like a bird without wings. The bird is there. The bird might be a kosher bird. It's fully alive. It can't fly. It's not going anywhere. Whereas a mitzvah that's done with emotion, I'm giving it wings. And actually what's described, the two wings are ahava and yirah. The love and the awe are the two wings that I attach to my mitzvah and make it soar. There's a story about the Baal Shem Tov. He used to travel from town to town, from village to village, and he once came into a town and they said, oh, come, we want to show you our shul, our synagogue. They brought him into the synagogue and he walked in and then he walked out and he says, I can't pray here. They say, why? Why can't you pray here? He said, the synagogue is just so full of prayers. They're like, wait, isn't that a good thing? Like, why can't you pray here if the synagogue is so full of prayers? He's like, no, you don't understand. Prayers are recited in the synagogue, but they're meant to ascend. They're meant to fly up. In this synagogue, the prayers are just trapped. They haven't gone anywhere. Like, they don't have wings. He felt, obviously, he was a level of a tzaddik who has a tremendous sensitivity to holy things. He was able to feel that the prayers that were uttered in the synagogue were without passion. They were very dry. So they were there. They said the prayers, but they didn't have that passion to make them fly. So the Tanya says, we're trying to create mitzvahs with wings that make them fly. So what if I contemplate and I meditate and I really try, and the best I can get to is like an intellectual appreciation. I can't create these very fiery, passionate emotions. Tanya says, don't worry, because there is a phrase. I'll say it in Hebrew, then I'll translate. Machshava tova hakadosh baruch hu metzarfa lemaaseh. There's a phrase that says, a good thought, God attaches it to deed. Usually this phrase is used when somebody intends to do something good and then they don't get to doing it. For example, you said, oh, could someone please make me a coffee? And I say, sure, I'm going to make you a coffee, right? And I run to make you coffee in the other room, and I'm about to start mixing the coffee, and you say, never mind, someone just delivered Starbucks, right? Then it's like, oh, like I really wanted to do the right thing, and I just didn't get to it. We say, don't worry, it's the thought that counts. You had the good thought, it's as if you did it. The author, the Tanya here, says the terminology, though, the phrase is very interesting. It says, a good thought, God attaches it to action. It doesn't say God sees it as if it was action. God attaches it to action. And so the Tanya explains here in chapter 16 that another meaning to this phrase is when someone has a good thought, when someone's using their thoughts to try to meditate and contemplate and create emotion, but they can't really birth those like very passionate emotions. They're only, they can't really get past the more intellectual appreciation type of emotions. God will attach it to action. God will put those wings on your bird and he'll make it fly anyway. Because you're trying. You're trying to invest emotion, even if you can't create the most passionate emotion, but you are creating some level of emotion based on your ability. God will consider it as if you really put that emotion into your mitzvah, and your mitzvah will have the same quality, the same flight ability as a mitzvah that was done with tremendous amount of passion. Yes, Barbara, you want to say something?
Well, what if you don't have a positive approach and you're negative about doing certain acts that might be considered mitzvot, or you're depressed and you're just not in that state of mind, that positive state of mind? How does God interpret that? And our behavior is going to probably reflect those negative. I'm devil's advocate here, but
I love that.
people are
That's great.
people, and we're not always positive and enthusiastic, and sometimes we just, yeah, we don't want to.
Right.
And,
No,
and then you
that's an
feel
excellent
guilty.
question.
I mean, right?
The
Then
guilt
you
is
feel
definitely
like
not
crap
kosher.
because you know.
Yeah, no, the guilt is definitely not kosher. And there's a later chapter that talks about the guilt. But let's start with where you started. You realize that this is a second tool that Tanya's giving us. The Tanya didn't start with this tool of emotion because it didn't want us to get trapped in exactly this thought. Well, if I can't do it with positive emotion, if I can't get into it, then I may as well not do it because it probably doesn't count anyway. So that's why the first tool we got was the Moach Shalatal Alev. Your mind needs to control your heart. Number one, just do it. Step number two, now try to build emotion into it. Sometimes you'll succeed, sometimes you won't succeed. That's okay. The only one who succeeds in being passionate all the time is the tzaddik, because that's the person who's always inspired. And we're not a tzaddik. So by definition, not all our mitzvahs are going to come with passion. Sometimes I drop my charity in the charity box, just routine. I'm used to it. And sometimes I'm more intentional about it. Sometimes I like to think that every week I light my Shabbat candles with a certain amount of intention. But there definitely have been weeks in my life where I was rushed and things were crazy, and it was like, let's just get it done, in the right time before sunset, right? I still did it. It's that number one, I want to make sure I'm doing the action. But number two, at the same time, I need to really work on infusing as much passion as I can into it. If someone's finding that they're depressed and they can't do it with positive passion, so then again, I would go back to what the Tanya teaches us is the source of the emotions. The emotions, we will give birth to emotions based on what we know and what we study. So perhaps if I can't bring myself to feel positive emotions about a certain mitzvah, then maybe I need to learn more about this mitzvah. Maybe I need to learn more about God and why he appreciates this mitzvah and what this mitzvah does to me and to the world. When I do this mitzvah, naturally I'm going to start creating some emotion for it. So like we said, whatever we fill our mind with, that's what we start feeling, We sit and watch TV all day with like all the ads. Suddenly we just feel like we need to have certain brands and certain items. Like, why are we so passionate about certain things? Because our mind is full of it, and whatever fills our mind gives birth to emotions. So filling our minds with godliness, with understanding God and Torah, we'll start feeling emotions for that. I want to share one story that I heard for the first time today. I've heard a different variation, but I never heard the details of it. There's a story about the previous Chabad Rebbe, Rabbi Yosef Yitzchak Schneerson. He came to the U.S. at the end of his life, and he was not, the last few years of his life, he really was not very well. And he lived in Brooklyn, and this was in the 1940s, a physician came to see him, and the previous Chabad Rebbe, he used to smoke a lot. And there was an ashtray in his office. Now, this was the 1940s. It was pretty common. The doctor looks at him and looks at the ashtray and says, Rabbi, do you know that there's all these studies coming out now that say that smoking is really, really not a healthy thing? And they're really encouraging people to start giving up their smoking habits. And the rabbi looks at him and asks him some questions and says, thank you. Thank you for telling me. Okay, the exam is over, the visit ends, and the doctor packs up his bag and pulls out a cigarette and offers one to the rabbi and says, "Here, Rabbi, would you like one?" And the rabbi looks at him and says, "I don't smoke." Says, "What do you mean you don't smoke?" He's like, "Oh, now that you've told me what you told me, I'm done with smoking. I don't smoke anymore." Think about, you stop for a minute. You think, here, this doctor had all the knowledge in the world. He knew every reason of why his patients and the world should not be smoking. And yet, when he was done working, he had no problem pulling out a cigarette. The Rebbe, on the other hand, as soon as he had the knowledge, it immediately translated to feelings and action. The idea is that not always what we know will translate into how we behave. It takes effort, right? It's very easy to say and know a lot of things and not actually to act on it. And what the Tanya is asking us in chapter 16 is take the time to really think about those things that you know. You know, you can study more and you'll know more and you'll have more to meditate about. But if you really take the time to contemplate these ideas that you already have about God, you'll start feeling something, and it's going to affect your actions, and it's going to infuse more passion in your Judaism. So if we're to end with an exercise for the day or for the week, I would say think of a meditation that talks to you. You know, a short line or a short paragraph that when you really think about it, it inspires you to some degree. And take that meditation with you this week. When you're about to engage in a mitzvah, you know, at least once a day, when you're about to do something right or you're trying to get yourself to do it with more passion, take a moment to close your eyes and meditate on this idea, and then see how your mitzvah looks different. With that, we conclude chapter 16. I'm happy to answer questions or discuss. If anyone has any questions or thoughts or comments? Yes, Arlene.
When a mitzvah is done with passion, as opposed to just being done because it's a mitzvah that needs to be done, the end result is the same.
The end result maybe on a physical level is the same, but on a
Right.
spiritual level is different.
Mhm.
The spiritual energy that's created through this mitzvah's effect on the world, and this mitzvah's effect on my own soul is infinitely richer when it's done with passion. It's like, it's okay if it was without passion, but it's incomparable to when it's done with passion. And ultimately, God wants us to do it with passion. When we say the Shema every day, we say, you shall you shall love God with all of your heart. And actually, the word levavecha technically translates as hearts, not just almost like plural hearts. And one of the explanations that's given is with all of you, with all of your passion, with all of your feeling, with both of your souls, you know, with every part of you. God wants us to be fully invested in the mitzvahs, not just something we do with our hands or with our mouth, but something that all of us is really in it. Yes, Harriet.
So the teaching, I guess, kind of assumes that we're more knowledgeable about the mitzvot than some of us are. So some of us are probably doing mitzvah and maybe doing with passion because, like, some of us grew up with Tikkun Olam, you know, and we do that because that's part of our expression of Judaism. But I couldn't tell you, is that, you know, 213 or 436. And so talking about infusing mitzvah with more passion, I guess that my struggle is, first I have to figure out what the mitzvah are, either that I am doing or that I could be doing, which is why I keep asking such questions of how do you do lights, how do you do food, all of that. And so, I mean, I guess that's the place where I'm going like, oh yeah, this makes sense, except for you know, I didn't grow up like your kids can recite, you know, mitzvah and which one, you know, 613, like roll off their tongue. And I'm like, is that a mitzvah or is that just the right thing to do? And if I were doing it as a mitzvah, how would I be doing it this way? Or anyway, so that was kind of where I got caught up in today's teaching. I mean, I can do some things with passion, and I'm like, oh, wait, that's actually a mitzvah.
Well, for starters, there's nothing wrong with investing passion into something that's not a mitzvah if it's a good thing. Tikkun olam is a general term. It's making the world a better place. So Tikkun olam, I would say, as long as Tikkun olam is practical, it includes a lot of mitzvahs, right? Working on making the Tikkun olam that's just spoken about in flowery language and doesn't actually have concrete details to it, there's not necessarily much mitzvah in that. But yes, I know you're it sounds like you're asking, like, I want to do everything right and then infuse passion into that. And I would say, look at all the stuff you're already doing. You're doing a lot of mitzvahs, right? There's so many mitzvahs that you're already doing. There's so many, whether technically is a mitzvah or just general service of God, going to synagogue is not actually a mitzvah, but if you're going to synagogue, you're doing it because you're trying to serve God. So all of the things that you're doing Jewishly, you can use the same meditation to infuse passion into them. Now, if you're worried that maybe there are some mitzvahs that you don't know about, that you want to study more about, that it's a separate thing. That's something that I think, sitting and studying about the mitzvahs, studying the code of Jewish law, to really start understanding what are all the mitzvahs out there that I may not know about. But the passion here is spoken about very generally, service of God with passion. And all those mitzvahs. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just say, I mean, I feel like the work that I do at Jewish Family Service is service to God, that it is
100%.
sacred work, and that the clients are like, thank you, or help, so, but in terms of, so yes, I mean, because I am passionate about what I do. I am passionate about the work, which is why I do it every day.
So Harriet, find the mitzvah that you're not so passionate about. The one that's like a little more difficult to do. And then see if you can infuse passion into that with the meditation.
Okay.
Does that make sense? Now, I just, since you already brought it up, I literally met someone today who just described to me how Jewish Family Services of Dallas literally saved their life. So you're 100% serving God through your work at Jewish Family Services. And we need many more people like you doing this kind of amazing work. Exactly which mitzvah you're ticking off, well, we could sit and do an analysis on that, but I don't see the point of that. It's one big mitzvah, and there's a lot of positive there. Arlene wanted to say something, and then
I was just going to say,
yeah.
I guess that's what maybe I'm getting too literal in terms of like, which mitzvah is that, which mitzvah, and it's just like, don't worry about it.
Yeah, don't worry about it. Your general service of God should be passionate. And then you could, take care of the details of the mitzvahs. Arlene, what do you want to say?
I just wanted to expand upon what Harriet was saying. I think what she was saying is just by virtue of living a good life and treating people well and doing what you know is right, I think, I don't know all the mitzvahs, but they're bound to be included in them because that's just part of being a good person. And so I don't worry, oh, what particular mitzvah is this that I'm performing? I just know that what I'm doing is good. And that has to be good. That has to be something that God wants.
Right. And 100%. And I think that one thing that you can ask yourself when you're doing, generally doing good, think of like, where are the places that are harder for me to do good, right? We all have the people that it's like fun to be kind to, and then that like really annoying person that we really don't want to be nice to, So now let's try, and maybe we're nice to them anyway, just because we're controlling ourselves and doing the right thing. Now maybe I can do that with a little bit of more passion if I work on, meditating and realizing that this is what God wants me to do, and create a love for God that will express itself through this action. So I don't think we have to take apart the things that we do to figure out which mitzvahs are involved. I would say that if you're worried like Harriet that maybe there are mitzvahs you don't know about or you're not doing right, you can work from the opposite direction. Study the code of Jewish law, right? And or that's if you really want to like get into the details. But when you or study some other text about mitzvahs, and when you learn about a mitzvah, you look at your life and say, wait, am I already doing this mitzvah? How can I incorporate more of this mitzvah in my life? Yes, I think Raina wanted to say something. Raina?
Sorry about that. I just don't know how to word. That's why I kind of pulled away, because I didn't know how to word it. Because the first sentence of chapter 16, I wrote it down, is the divine service of the Benoni is to govern and rule the nature that is in the left part of the heart. And it seems like that is the whole reason for bringing in that divine force. It calls it an illumination that illuminates the divine soul abiding in the brain. So, my question, because you talked mostly about servitude, and it's almost unselfish, and yet that first sentence, it seemed very selfish, like you would do it for a purpose that is personal self, rather than just the servitude, which is what you've been talking about.
So, what you're referencing is the very beginning of chapter 16. The way that Tanya
Right.
introduces the concepts that we spoke about today is it says that an important principle that the Benoni has to remember, the Benoni meaning all us average people who are aspiring to be a Benoni, is to govern the nature that is in the heart. And by that, the Tanya is trying to tell us that we have, until now, we spoke about externally what we do, doing the right thing. And here it's introducing the idea that we need to also manage what's in our heart. We need to manage our emotions too. And this is where it describes we spoke about this previously, the left part of the heart versus the right part of the heart versus the brain, where the way that Tanya describes it is our animal soul or our natural emotions are in conceptually the left part of the heart. And the godly soul, the part of us that just wants to serve God, is in the right part of the heart and the brain. And so what the Tanya is telling us here is that a Benoni needs to control and manage that left side of their heart. Those natural emotions that I have that are maybe, I don't want to help this person, or maybe I'm not so interested in doing this. We need to harness these emotions and manage them correctly in the service of God. It's not just enough to do the right thing, but we need to work on feeling the right thing. Now, if we're not a tzaddik, we won't transform our emotions. It's not like, wow, we're going to start only wanting to do the right thing from now. That's not going to work. But we need to work on incorporating some of that into our lives as much as we can. And we do that, again, by utilizing the capacity that the mind has over the heart. That because the mind has the ability to create emotions in the heart, this is, everything that we discussed today. We need to work on birthing those emotions in our heart. So the introduction sounds a little different, but if you keep reading, Raina, you'll see it leads right into the discussion that we had today. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, it does. It does. I just didn't know which one came first. It's very interesting in the Torah this week. There is that sentence which is build me a sanctuary, and then I'll dwell in it. And it's been fascinating me since, because I was thinking, well, which one comes first? Do you bring God in first, or do you bring the principles and the precepts and all of that first, and then God comes and dwells in? Or do you bring God to dwell in first. I mean, it's just,
Well,
I don't know, it's been just kind of, I mean, I see that in what you were talking about today, but yeah.
there's a lot of depth in what you said, Raina. A lot of depth and a lot of truth about, in short, if we want to bring God into something, you need to create the something that you're gonna bring God into. When we talk about actions versus emotions in Judaism, the reason actions are always discussed first and prioritized is because, like you said, my actions create the structure, right? If I'm not doing the mitzvahs first, there's no mitzvahs to infuse passion into. If we're gonna start first with the passion, like bring God into it, but there's no action involved, so what am I bringing God into? So you're right. It's that same idea of building the sanctuary, work on doing the right thing, and then start bringing the emotion into it. But thank you for sharing that. That was very powerful.
Thank you.
Someone else, Lorraine, wanted to say something. Anyone who has to go, we understand. It's 9:18. Have a great week. Have a good night.
Thank you.
But you're welcome to stay on. Yes, Lorraine.
I love what Rena just said, the build me a sanctuary, because we can build the sanctuary, right? It's in our heart and in our head. I mean, we can build a sanctuary to invite God. I mean, yes, you can take it literally about building the temple, blah, 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 and here's the gold and do this and do that. But I believe what Raina just was talking about, that the sanctuary where God wants to dwell is within our heart and within our head. And so the ahafta part that you just were, with all my mind and all my soul and all, it doesn't say, with a piece of me, like I'm going to pick which, so I love that you brought that up. Thank you, Raina. But I was going to,
yes, go ahead. Now, I was going to say, it's not a contradiction. The Jews in the desert actually had to build a physical sanctuary at the same time. The instruction is for all people, for all times, to build a sanctuary. And I don't know if you're familiar with this, but in the actual text of the words, it says, God says, they should build for me a sanctuary and I will dwell within them. And the commentaries right away say, what? Dwell within them? You mean dwell within it? And the first, I believe it's Rashi, who comments and says, well, when they will build a sanctuary within themselves, I will dwell within every single one of them. So exactly what you were just saying.
Yeah, I love that. Anyway, I love the whole spiritual esoteric side. But I was just going to say, I did what you were just talking about today, and it's fascinating to me that I did get the extra bump, and it was like a fist bump from God. It was very funny. So, I used to be a homeless rights attorney 1.5 years ago. So my whole life, I've run around with a car full of food and protein bars and juice boxes, and like I've just done it my whole life. My kids were raised with it. Like we have always, that's but just a piece of who. So today I'm picking up someone and I have 3 protein bars in the car left and water bottles, and I'm handing out, and like, and it's easy peasy. Like you get stopped at a red light and there's somebody there and you give them a protein bar. And so anyway, and they're like, oh, thank you, blah, blah, blah. Well, there was a man in a wheelchair, and we were going forward, and he was at the cross. Like, so I had to make the biggest effort. Like it, and my brain said, you're going up Preston. Do you really want to turn right, make a U-turn, give the guy the protein bar? It was a pain. It truly was, but it was my last one and I wanted to clear them out. And so there was like, oh, but I could check that box of like being done. And it was a big effort because I had to cross 2 lanes, go around, loop around. Anyway, bottom line is, when I give the guy the bar, there were 3 today. He's the only one that said, God bless you. And I said, oh, sweetie, thank you. God bless you too. Like, and then I circled back around. I got back on Preston. I went the right way. And I was like, wow, I got blessed for that one. The other ones that were easy peasy, and I just did the drive-by, like, okay, here you go, good luck. I hope, it's a beautiful day, whatever. But the only person who blessed me was the one that was a huge freaking effort. And I was like, wow, that's so fascinating to me. Thank you. I gotcha. I felt the difference. And so I think you're onto something. I think that when it's so easy to do good and do right in our world, yeah, God is smiling and God's like, way to go, keep it going, Lorraine, keep doing whatever. But when you make an insane effort and it's not easy, and you even argue in your brain, like, do I really, should I do this? Then you get blessed. Then God is like, I saw that. And you get the little God wink. So I don't know. I felt that today.
I love that, Lorraine. Thank you for sharing. Good to see you, Gail. Good night, everybody. Have a wonderful week.
Bye. That was a great class. I
Thank
was
you.
taking notes and sending them to Lisa. So I have 2 pages on what you were talking about.
Send her our warmest regards.
Yeah.
That was wonderful, Deanie. Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Deanie,
Bye,
and
guys.
everybody.